Hello there, fellow truth seekers. Glad to come be with you again on this Shabbat. Today I'd like to do a little bit of a study on the book of Enoch. And I know I've talked about Enoch before, and of course a lot of people, because it's not in the canon, and that doesn't mean that at some point it hadn't been in the canon, but after the Messiah come, the Pharisees and people like that, they, the book of Enoch talks about the Son of Man a bunch. And so, it's very possible that they took it out. And what people have to understand too is about the Pharisees, and Josephus, in his writings, he basically drops the beans on them. He was of the line of the Maccabees, Josephus was, and of course the Maccabees were around back during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes IV. He was a Seleucid, and he's the one that Daniel prophesied committing the abomination that causes desolation in the temple of Nehemiah, or Ezra and Nehemiah, the second temple. And what he did was he put up a statue of Saturn in the temple and sacrificed a pig on the altar, which was an absolute abomination. And that's where you get Hanukkah, is after the Maccabean revolt, and they drove and Antiochus died. He died, and the Judas Maccabean led a revolt. His father started it, and Judas Maccabean was called the Hammer, because he was a ferocious warrior, and they drove the Seleucids out. And of course the Seleucid Empire was one of the four empires that kind of arose out of the Greek Empire whenever Alexander the Great died. His four top generals kind of divided it up, and the Seleucid Empire was the most powerful of them, the biggest. And they fought Ptolemy, had control of Egypt and parts of North Africa, and so they fought. The Seleucid and Ptolemy fought continuously for control of the Levant, or the area of Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, that area in there. They fought for that all the time, and it went back and forth. One time, Ptolemy would have control of it, and the other time the Seleucid people would have control of it. But under the Maccabees, they drove them out, and they cleansed the temple, and supposedly they didn't have any oil for the menorah in there, and it miraculously, they had very little, and they put this oil in there, and it just burned continuously. It didn't never go out, and that's why they celebrate Hanukkah, is in celebration of the cleansing of the temple and supposedly this miracle of the oil. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up is to give you an idea of his lineage. But the Pharisees, I talked about this before, about how the Pharisees arose after the people had went into captivity under the Babylonians, and then they ultimately were freed by Cyrus, and they were allowed to go back. Some of those Levites, or those people that came back, and it may have even been people that had stolen the identity of some of them people. I mean, Satan knows no bounds when it comes to deceit and deception and stuff like that. It could have been some of those Babylonian priests that come back in there with them and began to corrupt the system. And by about 175, 200 BC, the Zadok priests got, they had to leave. They were the sons of Zadok, and they were Levites. They were, and they were given a charge. The sons of Zadok were given the charge of keeping the calendar and keeping the Matzeroth and the scrolls and stuff. They were sort of scholars or whatever, and they kind of kept all that stuff. So when they left, they took all that with them and went to Qumran out in the wilderness. Same place that John the Baptist was at. He was in the wilderness in Qumran. The Messiah went there. And of course, we know from a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls that they found that they had a lot of stuff that in the time of the Messiah, the people were not aware of. One, of course, the book of Enoch and a lot of these other books, the book of the giants, and of course they didn't find a complete scroll of the book of Enoch. They only found fragments of it, but all the fragments match up with the Ethiopian version, which was written in Ge'ez. Ge'ez was an ancient language there in Ethiopia, probably their original language. And of course, I've talked about this before, that there's been some debate as to which language is the original language, the language that Noah spoke, that came down to us after the flood. I mean, there never was a confounding of languages or anything, or multiple languages, until after the fall of Babel under Nimrod. And then the languages got confounded and people got placed where the Father wanted them to be. Because they refused, they still, even after the fall of Babel, and the confounding of the languages, they still wanted to hang around. They still wanted to hang around there, and so they had to be forcibly moved to where they were at. And the Native Americans even say that they were placed where they were at. They were placed here, and after the Babel, and then 200 or 300 years after that, during the time of Peleg, is when the supercontinent broke apart and began to drift, and to further separate these people, because they were still, a lot of them were still wanting to try to get back to where they had been, back to the area over there around where Noah and them settled at after the flood. And so it's believed that it was either Hebrew or Aramaic. I tend to believe it was Hebrew. I believe it was the Hebrew language that was the language of Noah. And Aramaic is a sister language that is, very similar to Hebrew, but a little, not quite as complex as Hebrew. Hebrew's kind of a difficult language. Aramaic's a little easier. And so, the documents there that they found there at Qumran, like I said, it had fragments of the Dead Sea, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it had fragments of the Book of Enoch, and those particular fragments were estimated to be from 300 BC. And of course, like all of the Hebrew books, the books of the canon, the Bible, but all their holy books, or like Enoch and the Book of the Giants and the Book of Noah and different ones. Now, some of these, because the Zadok priest, they were always people coming in and out of Qumran, different groups, and they would bring their own kind of literature and books and stuff. So they had sort of a library there. And I guess towards the end there, when the Romans got complete control of that area, that's when they began to put them in those urns and stuff, and hiding them in them caves and sealing them up for our time, that they would be opened up and revealed. But it would be up to godly men to discern which ones were really legitimate and meant for our edification, or whether they were, again, Satan. He's going to always try to slide something in there that to try to confuse people and stuff. But again, the fragments they found matched the one that was there in Ethiopia, that was in the Ge'ez language, that was interpreted by a Frenchman back in the 1700s. And of course, it didn't really get well known until, to the rest of the world, and really until the 20th century. I think it was the 20th century when R.H. Charles, maybe the 19th, when R.H. Charles translated it into English from the French translation. And so, and then it's been compared, and it's, those fragments that they found match what's in these translations. And then when you begin to look at the scriptures, it doesn't go, and the reason I don't think it goes into as great a detail about these things as like the book of Enoch does, is because they had the book of Enoch. And there's a lot of times it'll tell you about other books like Jasher and Jubilees. It says, is it not written in the book of Jasher, or is it not written in the book of Jubilees? The Jubilees were 50-year periods, segments of time, 50-year segments, and they would have a Jubilee year. The 49th year was actually the beginning of it, and then on the 50th year is when all debts were forgiven, all slaves are freed, all property reverts back to its original owner. An equitable system, because, and I think the reason the Father, come up with that for the Hebrew people and all, was because he knew that there's always going to be people who are more gifted at financial dealings, handling money, making money, and that they would end up with everything. They would just, or their family would ultimately end up with all the property. Just like today we see how all the wealth has gotten concentrated into a few people's hands. So, you see it. And so I want to just kind of do a little bit of study, and it really, I want to do the study on, kind of around the watchers, the fallen angels. And these angels were a class of angels called the watchers. They were not the Satans. The Satans or seraphim, they're the highest order of them. You say you have, and there's probably a lot of other orders of beings that go down, but you have the seraphim, cherubim, cherubs, ophanim, stoichions, luminaries. You have all these different ones, watchers, and so the Satans are the ones that go out deceiving and tempting. They're the ones that tempted Eve, beguiled her. And they're the ones that are, the main Satan, Hasatan, the Satan, is called the tempter. That's what he does. He goes around tempting, and he tempted these watchers. There was 200 of them, and he tempted them and, convinced them to do this. And it was for his own purpose. His own purpose was to corrupt humankind, the human genetics, and not only that, through his, their offspring, to be able to usurp Adam's authority, man's authority on the earth. And that's what they did. They usurped his rulership, because I've talked about how Adam was a B'nai Ha-Elohim. He was a son of Elohim, and his purpose was to be the ruler of this world. Just like when our Messiah returns, his second coming, and he sets up a kingdom here. And of course, it's not the kingdom of God per se. It's a kingdom that is teaching us how to be able to enter into his kingdom when it does come, which is at the end, after judgment, after all that, and the earth is burnt off, and the heaven, new earth, and the new Jerusalem comes down. Then that is the kingdom of Elohim. But we have to be prepared and taught, because you got to understand, his kingdom up there in the Shamayim, in the third heaven, we cannot conceive of it. It is just, our minds cannot wrap around it. We have to be, we're like little children now. We're like little, toddlers or little adolescents that are being taught about his ways, about his government, and how it operates. And then whenever it finally comes, then we can handle it because it's going to blow our minds. We're just not going to be able to conceive of it. We cannot conceive of it. So we have to be slowly taught. And then the Messiah, when he comes down here and establishes a kingdom here, it's a type. It's a type of what the Father's kingdom is going to be like and how it's governed. It's about government, about, true, righteous, and just government. Something man has no concept of, because obviously look around the world and you see that it becomes corrupted every time, and the justice system becomes corrupted to the point where, you get the justice you can afford, you can buy. But that's kind of what this is, is all about, is to bring us up and rear us up. And give you an example of whenever the Father established families and marriage, and the family is a micro government. And if we are, running that government, our little micro government, the father and the mother, king and queen of this kingdom, their little kingdom, and they have their subjects, their children, and they teach them justice, they teach them righteousness, they teach them these things. These are types, examples and types of how our Father runs his kingdom. If we're doing it the way that he commands us and teaches us in his word. It's a little microcosm. And so of the greater kingdom of Elohim. The reason I'm saying this here is to show that that this is the purpose of everything that's happened, and that it's been going on through these 6 days, and then we're going to be coming to a day of rest and teaching. This is preparing us for when the kingdom of the Father does come down here, and he's with us. It says he will be in that city, and there'll be no need, for light, for a moon or a sun, because him and the Messiah will be the light thereof. But this is the book of Enoch. This is the R.H. Charles version. And there's other people that's done translations of it, the book of First Enoch. The words of the blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect, and righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. And he took up his parable and said, Enoch, a righteous man whose eyes were opened by Elohim, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens, talking about the Messiah, which the angels showed me. And from them I heard everything, and from them I understood as I saw, but not for this generation, but for a remote one which is for to come. Concerning the elect I said, and took up my parable concerning them. The Holy Great One will come forth from his dwelling, and the eternal Elohim will tread upon the earth, even on Mount Sinai, and appear from his camp, and appear in the strength of his might from the heaven of heavens. And all shall be smitten with fear, and the watchers shall quake. And great fear and trembling shall seize them unto the ends of the earth, and the high mountains shall be shaken, and the high hills shall be made low, and shall melt like wax before the flame. And the earth shall be wholly rent sunder, and all that is upon the earth shall perish, and there shall be a judgment upon all men. But with the righteous he will make peace, and will protect the elect, and mercy shall be upon them. And they shall be all belong to Elohim, and they shall be prospered, and they shall all be blessed, and he will help them all. And light shall appear unto them, and he will make peace with them. And behold, he cometh with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness which they have ungodly committed, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. And this is talking about the Messiah, coming, with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment. And that's what he's going to do. It says he will rule with the rod of iron and judge the nations. And of course, a lot of them will be destroyed. Those that come against him, they're going to be destroyed. But he, this is, and of course, Enoch was the seventh from Adam. He was the father of Methuselah. And so, this, and I believe that this book and others, it's intimated in here that he wrote a bunch. He was called the scribe. He was always writing. He was the first man to learn writing. And he was taught writing so that he could pass this stuff down. And it went to Noah, and then it came through the flood, and of course through Satan and people. A lot of them have gotten, the truth's known. They're probably in the Vatican or somewhere, because they talk like they've got pretty much all the ancient books of all kinds, and they refuse to let people in there to see them and stuff except for themselves. But anyway, I'm gonna go here to the book of the Watchers. And talk a little bit about them, because it's the fall of the angels, the demoralization of mankind, the intercession of the angels on behalf of mankind, the dooms pronounced by Elohim on the angels, the messianic kingdom, and a Noah fragment. There's a fragment of the book of Noah in here, but there was what people don't understand is there's two different Noahs. They were two different Lamechs, they were two different Enochs, and two different Methuselahs. One was from the bloodline of Adam, the other was from the bloodline of Cain. And of course, the bloodline of Cain is the evil line. But anyway, and I've got the scriptures here. I'm going to read this here first. This is in Genesis chapter 6, and you'll see where it parallels this. It says, chapter 6, verse 1, and it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And then the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. In other words, from then to the destruction of the flood was 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of Elohim came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And Elohim saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And of course it repented him, that he repented Yahweh that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And then he talks about destroying him, and then about Noah finding grace in his eyes. Well, then here, this is in chapter 6 of the book of Enoch. And it's funny, it's chapter 6 in here, and it's chapter 6 in the Bible too. But it says, And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives among them, from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all, and of course, that's verse 1 through 3 of the book of 6th chapter of the book of Enoch. See, it was Semjaza that Satan went and brought his attention to these women, how beautiful they were, and and I'll show you in the book of Jude where it quotes out of here. And then in verse 4 of Enoch here, it says, And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecation upon it. And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared, the sixth from Adam, on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they is some kind, my understanding now, I don't know, there's some kind of a stone up there on top of Mount Hermon, which is in northern Israel, southern Lebanon. It's in that area up there. That there's some kind of a stone there that has something written in it, and it has to do with that very thing, their oath that they made. And these are the names of their leaders. Semjaza, their leader, Arakiba, Ramiel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Danel, Ezekiel, Barajikijal, Azazel, Aramoros, Batariel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samsipiel, Satariel, Turiel, Jamjeel, Siriel. These are their chiefs of tens. Okay? And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. See, they left their estate. Okay? And they defiled themselves. They were supposedly Kodesh beings, and so they, because man was fallen, and the daughters of men were fallen, and then they came into them and knew them, then they become defiled. They defiled themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants, psychedelics and stuff like that. They were teaching them how to do that kind of stuff. Chemistry, basically, but they were teaching them how to take plants, the coca plant and poppy and different ones, and making substances out of them so they could have these visions and stuff. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells. And the modern equivalent of that was, my understanding, is somewhere around 350 cubits, 400 cubits, which comes out to 450, 500 feet. So these giants got up to 450, 500 feet tall. They were the Titans. And it says, who consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, that's how big they were. I mean, they were so big that no matter how much the humans were harvesting, and I would say by this time, by the time of Enoch, the seventh generation, they were probably millions of people. It doesn't take that long. I mean, look at from the time of Noah to the time of Nimrod, there was millions of people. I mean, just in 4 or 5 generations. 300 years or whatever or 200 years from the time of Noah after the flood, and they settled and began to multiply, to the time of Nimrod was probably 150, 200 years, and they was, already millions of people. And so people can multiply, like rabbits. And back then they were probably even more fertile, and more wasn't genetically messed up like we are today. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. So they started eating people. And you think about it. I mean, a giant that big could reach down and grab a human being up and throw them in their mouth like eating a piece of popcorn or something, And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. That's when they began to create chimeras and stuff. They were mixing humans and these animals, and mixing animals and animals, creating all kinds of chimeras, griffins and hydras and medusas and satyrs, and I mean on and on and on. Tyrannosaurus Rex. I believe that there were dinosaurs that the Father created, but they were plant eaters. They were, like Diplodocus and brontosauruses and stuff like that, and that the fallen ones began to make all these meat-eating, beasts like Tyrannosaurus Rex and the raptors, and to devour. And it says in reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh, and to drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. And then it comes here, and now this is about Azazel or Azazel. Here it says, and Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments and use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones and coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings and stuff, in other words, sorcery. pharmakia. Armoros, the resolving of enchantments. In other words, how to call up these fallen ones, and how to beguile people and stuff. And Barakiel taught astrology. Instead of the Matzaroth, they were corrupting it, teaching this astrology. Kokobel, the constellations. Ezekiel, the knowledge of the clouds, about weather. Arikiel, the signs of the earth. Shamsiel, the signs of the sun. And Sariel, the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. Now, you see, they were teaching them this stuff, because men wanted to know this stuff, and they were, doing stuff trying to figure it out anyway. It wasn't like that men were just, blank programs or something. I mean, no, they had, they were inquisitive. We were created to be that way. We were created to be inquisitive, to want to know. But the Father wanted us to know righteous knowledge. And this kind of stuff, this higher level of knowledge, was not something that we were ready for. It was introduced to us before we were mature enough to be able to handle that kind of knowledge without destroying ourselves. I mean, we see the result of having this knowledge. Look around the world now. The threat of annihilation from, nuclear weapons and biological weapons and chemical weapons and all this kind of stuff. We just are too immature to understand the ramifications of these things. Because you're always going to have some people that, even though they know what they're doing, that this is dangerous or whatever, they got to know, they got to see, they got to do it. Anyway, just like them fallen watchers, I'm Sam Jaza saying, I'm afraid I alone will bear the repercussions of this great sin that I'm going to do, and y'all back out. He knew what he was doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. That's the reason, whenever it comes to their punishment, the Father had no mercy on them, because they knew what they were doing. And they let Hasatan, tempt them right into it. And they should have knew better. They knew who he was. They knew what he was. But, they let their, let it get the better of them. And so, after these, they're doing all this stuff, and it's causing all of this destruction. And, they taught them all this stuff, about these weapons and how to use them. And of course, I think it probably went even beyond that, because we can see there's areas like over there in the Middle East where they found vitrified glass. And vitrified glass can only happen from a thermonuclear blast. But it's in and around these ancient structures. I mean, the structures are not there, but the ruins of it is. And it's where they were, hit with a nuclear blast. And the Hindu people, the Asiatic Indian people, they have these Vedas, these books that are old, they are ancient. There's no doubt about it. And you got to understand, again, they all come from the same place. So they have knowledge about events and stuff, and they even probably, were able to get a hold of some of this stuff. Some of the stuff that Noah brought through the flood. And they have these Brahmanas that are these big ships that are flying in the air, and they have cities on them. They're not just like these little, like I talked about in the last video, those ephahs, these little flying saucers. No, these things were huge. And I mean, they had cities on them, and they were shooting at each other. They were several of them flying around, and of course, these were probably these giants. They the Titans, they were commanded to fight and we'll get to that. This is chapter 9 of Enoch. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from the Shamayim from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. And they said one to another, the earth made without inhabitant cries the voice of their crying up to the gates of heaven. And now to you, because when it was made, there wasn't no inhabitants on it. It was made without inhabitant. But now it's got inhabitants, and it's crying. The earth is crying out, just like with when Cain slew Abel. It said that his blood was crying out from the earth. It says, now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit, saying, bring our cause before the Most High. And they said to Yahweh of the ages, the Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and God of the ages, the throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages. And thy name, holy and glorious, and blessed unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou. And all things are naked and open in thy sight. And thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel, or Azazel, hath done, who have taught all righteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. Now see, it's telling you right there that men were already trying to learn this stuff. But these watchers accelerated it. They because whenever man's eyes was opened, and when they partook of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they chose evil. They chose evil rather than good. And so they began to strive to learn all these things. And so these watchers were teaching them. They were giving them this knowledge. And Shamzaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates. In other words, he was the main leader over all of those watchers. And they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. In other words, they were teaching them women how to paint their eye, put on makeup and jewelry and seductive clothing and all this kind of stuff to beguile men. And the woman who have borne giants, and the whole earth has therefore been thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. In other words, their offspring were killing and shedding blood and just doing a lot of unrighteousness. And now behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit to the gates of heaven, and their lamentations have ascended and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. And thou knowest all things before they come to pass. And they're talking to the Father, or to Yahweh, the Creator, the Messiah. And then knowest all things before thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them. And thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. And again, the Father, he knows everything that's going on at this period in time. But because man chose to be disobedient to him and rebel, like I said last week, we don't learn nothing except the hard way, So he's okay. You know better than me. You rejected me. You rejected my way. You want to follow them. Okay, the rebellious, the ones that rebelled, you want to follow them, join with them. Okay, you're going to see how they operate. You're going to see how their kingdom operates, as opposed to mine, where you can live in peace and happiness and joy and prosperity. But when you live under them, it's a dog eat dog, every man for himself, and murdering and killing and stealing and lying and cheating and all that kind of stuff. We have to see the two sides of the coin. The righteous side and the evil side. We got to see them both. And we're seeing it now. This period of time is the period of seeing the evil, just for what it really is. And and it doesn't last. It ends. It comes to an end. As where the righteous kingdom of the Father, it's eternal. It goes on forever. It says, Then said the Most High, the Holy and Great One spake, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, Noah, and said to him, Go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide thyself. In other words, he wanted him to hide because these giants and these chimeras and all that stuff, they're all, and these, they're destroying man, they're killing men off everywhere. And so hide yourself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, but the whole earth will be destroyed. And a deluge, flood, is about to come upon the whole earth and will destroy all that is on it. And now instruct him that he may escape and his seed may be preserved for all the generations of the world. And of course he instructing him in how to build an ark and to preserve himself and his family and the animals and all that stuff. And again, Yahweh said to Raphael, Bind Azazel, hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire, and heal the earth which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and that all the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. All right, now I'm going to stop right there, and we're going to go here to Leviticus chapter 16. Now here in the King James, they use the word scapegoat. But if you look in the concordance and you get the word scapegoat, it's Azazel. All right. It says here, this is Leviticus chapter 16, beginning at verse 8. And Aaron shall cast lots upon the two goats, one lot for the Lord, and the other lot for the scapegoat. But the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before Yahweh to make an atonement with him, and to let him go for a scapegoat into the wilderness. Dudael. That's where Dudael is. It's in the wilderness. And Aaron shall bring, which I'm going to just stop there, but be presented alive and let go for a scapegoat into the wilderness. For a scapegoat. All right, now we're going to look here in the concordance. Scapegoat is 5799 in the Hebrew. Let me get it here. I got it marked. All right, 5799. Now it says Zazel, but you got to remember they have pointers, and there's a pointer there, so it's an A. Azazel, scapegoat, a goat sent into the wilderness on the Day of Atonement, symbolically carrying away the sin of the community. Some see the word as the name of the desert spirit, Azazel, to whom the goat is sent. Scapegoat. It's sent to him. All sin is attributed to him. So they would put their sin on the scapegoat, send it out there to Azazel, and it was put on him. He was the one that received that sin. All right, and it says here in verse 9 of chapter 9, and to Gabriel said Yahweh, proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, and the children of the watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth, send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. The clash of the Titans. That's what it's talking about. Calls them reprobates and bastards because they were committed through fornication and created through fornication and through defilement. And so cause them to go forth, send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. For length of days shall they not have. And no request that they, i.e. their fathers, make of thee shall be granted unto their fathers on their behalf. In other words, those watchers, if they petition the Lord, to please spare our children or whatever, not going to do it. For they hope to live an eternal life, and that each one of them will live 500 years. So he numbered their days at 500 years. They were wanting to live eternally. They were wanting to be given eternal life, but Father said no. And the Lord said unto Michael, go, bind Simjaza and his associates, who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. Now, if you notice, Michael, Gabriel or Uriel binds Azazel alone by himself in the wilderness. But here, Michael binds Simjaza and all the other watchers, the other 198 that come down there with him, and says, go bind Simjaza, his associates, and his associates who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. Because the human women were unclean. They were, and so these watchers defiled themselves with them. So that kind of took away their righteousness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. So 70 generations, I talked about that last week, reckoning, if looking at the genealogies, their lifespans, like Adam's lifespan, I think, was 950 years, and then, Methuselah, 969 years. And it tells you that, when Seth was born, Adam was 100 and so many years old, and then when Enoch was born, Seth was 175 years old, and so you can kind of get from that, you can kind of build a timeline of years. And so since it was during the time of Jared and Enoch when this stuff was going on, you can figure from the time of Jared, when they began to have these hybrids. From then, 500 years, which would have been the around the time that right before the flood. That would be the extent of their life. That first generation of them. It says, and so from then, when they watched this, they had to watch their offspring kill each other off in this clash of the Titans. Then once that was done, then they were bound in these valleys, till 70 generations. So when you figure from reckoning it from then till, like I said, till probably somewhere around the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, when man's knowledge and technology began to do this. I mean, for 3,500 years, 4,000 years, I mean, this was pretty much the technological, there really wasn't a whole lot of technological advancement during that time. They were little blips here and there, where, for example, there in Egypt, which we don't know about those, like the Dendera bulb and the batteries they found over there in Egypt, the Damascus batteries. Over in Damascus, they found these batteries. Nobody really knows from what era that really came from. Probably before the flood would be my guess on it, but I'm not, nobody really can pinpoint it. They try to, make it that, well, it was during the time of Khufu and the pharaohs and stuff, but no, a lot of that stuff wasn't. It was before that. But anyway, so, they were in prison, it says, and in those days, and this is after, they come up, they've been, influenced and stuff, now they're waiting for judgment. They're waiting for the judgment. And it says, in those days, they shall be led off to the abyss of fire, and to the torment and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. And whosoever be condemned and destroyed will from thenceforth be bound together with them to the end of all generations, and destroy all the spirits of the reprobate and the children of the watchers, because they have wronged mankind. Destroy all wrong from the face of the earth, and let every evil work come to an end, and let the plant of righteousness and truth appear, and it shall prove a blessing. The works in righteousness and truth shall be planted in truth, and joy forevermore. And this is talking about at the very end, the last great day, when all unrighteousness, all sin, and all the wicked, rebellious entities, and all humans that join themselves with them will be destroyed. Those beings, the watchers in them, they're eternal beings. They already, they're already had eternal life, so they can't be destroyed. But they're going to be bound in a prison, in fire for eternity. And humans who join themselves with them, they're going to be destroyed. That's what it's talking about there. And whosoever shall be condemned and destroyed will from thenceforth be bound together with them to the end of all generations. So they're going to be destroyed. And then shall all the righteous escape, and shall live till they beget thousands of children, and all the days of their youth and their old age shall they complete in peace. And then shall the whole earth be tilled in righteousness, and shall all be planted with trees, and be full of blessing, and all desirable trees shall be planted on it, and they shall plant vines on it, and the vine which they plant thereon shall yield wine in abundance. And as for all the seed which is sown thereon, each measure of it shall bear 1,000, and each measure of olive shall yield 10 presses of oil. and cleanse thou the earth from all oppression, and from all unrighteousness, and from all sin, and from all godlessness, and all the uncleanness that is wrought upon the earth, destroy from off the earth. And all the children of men shall become righteous, and all nations shall offer adoration. And this is in the millennium. Offer adoration, and shall praise me, and all shall worship me, and the earth shall be cleansed from all defilement, and from all sin, and from all punishment, and from all torment, and I will never again send them upon it from generation to generation and forever. So during that time, he's going to, cleanse that millennium day of rest, is going to be a cleansing. The earth is going to be cleansed, and all sin is going to be dealt with, through that period up until judgment. And that's when all that have ever died will be raised up. Those who never knew the truth, who were deceived, and they will be given their final opportunity. But during that period of time, Satan is loosed, because during that 1,000 years, during the millennium, which is, again, it's a kingdom that is modeled after the kingdom of the Father, the kingdom of Elohim, which is going to be our final destination. But until we learn, truly know His ways, and all people have been given their opportunity to know the truth, they can't say they didn't know, because it's going to be taught to them. During the millennium, it's going to be taught to those who survived through the Great Tribulation. At the time of judgment, the last great day, then those who are raised in the second resurrection, at that time Satan will be loosed again, and so now they're going to know the truth, but they're going to have to suffer temptation and all, just like we did during this period. They're still going to have to face that. And even those people that went through the day of rest at the end, they're going to have to face it too. They're going to be tested. And so those that have been raised up, they'll be taught the truth. They'll know the truth. They won't be able to, and they'll be given their opportunity to have their name added into the book of life. And those people that came out of Great Tribulation, went through the millennium, those people also will have the opportunity to have their name added into the book of life. But, unfortunately, there are those that when Satan is loosed, they're still going to listen to him. I mean, he's just that powerful at deceiving people. You take Adam and Eve, well, they walked with Yahweh in the garden. So they knew it was true. They didn't have there was no doubt that he was their creator. And yet Eve was still beguiled and tempted to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, Adam was not deceived. Adam willfully chose to eat it. Now, I don't know, some people have speculated about his reasoning, that he could not bear the idea of being separated from her. I'm sure when he found out that she had eat it, that he's like, woman, what did you do? Why did you do that? And she's like, well, it's good. The serpent, tricked me into it, but it beguiled me. And so Adam's sitting there, probably in a conundrum, if I don't eat it, she's going to be taken away and I'm never going to see her again. Or if I do eat it, then I'm going to suffer the same fate that she does. And he chose to go along with her. So he willfully chose to do it. But But I believe, at least when you think about it, and again, I may be wrong, there's nothing that says this, so, it's just speculation, but I believe if he had not done it, and he had stayed true and obedient, that his righteousness would have covered her sin. Because she came from him. She was a part of him. She was part of his DNA. So if he would have, not listened to her and had stayed obedient, then he would have been righteous. And his righteousness would have atoned for her sin. Maybe wrong, just speculating, but, but see, he didn't reason that. He didn't understand that. And that's why it talks about, Paul talks about Christ being the second Adam. But he was obedient. And of course, because of his obedience, it justifies us. His righteousness covers our sin if we accept his atonement as the price for our sin. And we follow in his footsteps. We follow in his footsteps, which is how he was an example. He was our example of how we have to live in order to please the Father. I mean, if we follow what he did and walk in his footsteps, then we're not going to be, we're going to be righteous in the eyes of the Father. We're going to be acceptable. Because ultimately the Messiah was obedient, and that was what he wanted. That's what the Father wants. He wants our obedience above all sacrifice, even the sacrifice of his own Son. He wants us to be obedient. And so, in order to be obedient, that means we got to live a life that is like the Messiah. And of course he was obedient in all things. Paul says we established the law. We established the law by the way that we live our life and through love. That's how we establish the law. In the carnal flesh, we can't keep his law. But, Christ kept it. He lived it. And that's why we got to do the same thing. You love me, keep my commandments. And, in the first epistle of John, he talks, quite a bit about that. That's how we show our love to the Father, because we keep his commandments. We keep his law. And that's what, and that's all of his creation. It's not just man. It's the Malachim, the angels too. All those entities, they all follow his law. It applies to all of them. All of it. And so, to think that we can just go and do, we can go say a little prayer on an altar, have our head sprinkled with water or dipped under the water or whatever, and think that we can just go on living like we lived, is pure deception. This teaching that, you don't have to keep that, well, that causes people to do that. Heck, you a lot of times you see people that's supposed to be Christians in churches that living worse than people that don't make no claim at all. That are just plain sinners. That don't claim to be a Christian, don't claim to be nothing. And these people that claim to be Christians live worse than they do. And they think that they're going to, enter into his kingdom? I don't think so. And so, that's and as you can see, Enoch ain't teaching anything that's contrary to what the scriptures is teaching. I got a scripture here, and of course, Jude, he's quoting from, it says here in Jude chapter 6, or Jude verse 6, there's only one chapter to Jude, or the epistle of Jude. In verse 6 it says, "And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness until the judgment of the great day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire." And what that's telling us right there is that these scriptures, Sodom and Gomorrah is an example to us. That's the reason, these people that don't think you need to read the Old Testament, that's old. That was for the Jews. That don't apply to us. Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And that's why it's even saying it right there. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and strife, are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. And when it's talking about suffering the vengeance of eternal fire, it's not meaning you're going to suffer in fire. The fire is eternal. The fire is eternal. It's talking about, example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. In other words, being consumed, the body and the soul being consumed, and that being it. That's it for you. The fire is eternal, not the vengeance. They're just suffering the vengeance of the eternal fire. And them fallen beings too, but now the fallen beings, they're going to be in there forever. Because they are, but see, it says they left their first estate or principality. Some believe that they actually, somehow or another, they altered themselves to where they could cohabitate with women. Because a lot of people, they mistake what it says. Here they are. They reading something into a scripture, and I don't have it up, but I'll kind of do a rough quote of it. It says that they were talking about if a man married a woman and he died without having an offspring, a seed to carry on his bloodline, and then under the Hebrew law, his brother would marry her and produce seed for his bloodline, and and they went on that he had seven. There was 7 of these men, and each one of them married her, and none of them produced a seed, even through the 7th. He says, so who in the kingdom, who will be her husband? Which one of them? And he said, there's neither marrying nor giving in marriage, for you will be like the angels. They neither produce, they don't marry, and they don't reproduce. Doesn't say they can't reproduce, it just says they don't. They're eternal beings. They have, we reproduce to continue on, to continue man on. Okay, but that's because we're mortal beings. We die. We die physical death. So we have to reproduce ourselves. Because that's all you're really doing. I mean, when you produce offspring, you're just reproducing yourself. Because it's your DNA and genetics that are in that offspring. I mean, so it's just essentially you're reproducing yourself. But with the angels, they're eternal beings. They don't need to procreate. They don't need to reproduce. So, but it doesn't say that they can't, that they're incapable of it. Just says that they don't. So these entities, they came down here and they reproduced with human women. Now, did they actually have to alter themselves in some kind of way to make them compatible with human women? I don't know. It doesn't say that. It just says they came down here, saw they were, beautiful and desirable, and they took up them wives. And I think there is writing somewhere that talks about it where they came to the parents of these women, and told them they wanted to marry them and done whatever their custom was, offered them a dowry or, something, bought them basically or whatever. But I don't know. It doesn't really say that here. But as you can see, I mean, this is quoted, about them leaving their first state. We read that a while ago, that they, left where they were at and they came down here and they made a pact among themselves to do this thing. And so you can see that the book of Enoch doesn't contradict the scriptures. In fact, it kind of, gives it extra validity. And it's being quoted here. And then all of that, I think it's in 2 Peter, he talks about how, they are cast into Tartarus. But as it showed in there, I talked about last week about these disembodied spirits. Well, that's what happened with them watchers. They and by the way, I've got this book of Enoch on an ebook. I mean, it's free, but the the punishment for those children, those offspring, they ended up being, spirits. They were wandering spirits, that it says they hope to live an eternal life, and that each one of them will live 500 years. And it's talking about physical. They wanted to live a physical eternal life, but they didn't. And but it goes on. If you continue to read on in here, it talks about how they, the book of First Enoch. The other one, there's two other ones, Second and Third Enoch. I'd recommend you read it. And like I say here, when they translated this, now in the newer, the Revised King James, they use Azazel for scapegoat. But in here, they just put scapegoat into the Old King James. But that's what it's talking about, the word scapegoat, and I just showed you in the concordance that in the Hebrew, they just have Zazel. But, it's got a pointer right in front of that Z, and I think that pointer is an Azazel or Azazel, however you want to pronounce it. But the reason I just wanted to talk about this was because last week, we was talking about these spirits going around, the spirit of wickedness and the spirit of, the curse upon the earth. And I talked about how after the flood that these wandering spirits, the spirits of these Nephilim, were going around, causing havoc among especially the sons of Japheth. They were really going after them. And I think what they were doing was they were causing them to fight against each other, stirring them up. That's what I was talking about, how, they don't have no loyalty to each other. I mean, as far as these spirits don't have no loyalty to each other. And they like to pit groups of men, peoples against each other. And we see it going on around the world now. I was talking about how those four angels that were held there in the under the Euphrates River will be loosed in chapter 9 of Revelation. They'll be loosed and they go out. So I believe that's already happened. That they go to gather the kings of the east to prepare them. Okay, so they come out, and it's funny that India, China, Russia, and Iran, these 4 countries, is the ones that are really getting tight in their alliance. But they're close to each other there, and they have a history. They have a history going back thousands of years between them. So they familiar with each other, and so it's not, and they've traded and skirmished and and they really are descended from the line of Japheth. All of them, they all come from the same bloodline. And then in chapter 16 it talks about the 3 unclean spirits. Chapter 16 of Revelation talks about the 3 unclean spirits that come out of the mouth of the dragon and the beast and the second beast, and they go out to gather the rest of the world. And and in chapter 9 it says that the river Euphrates is dried up to prepare the way for the kings of the east, and how that the Chinese, I believe these, and these spirits may have been loosed even before it dried up, that went over there, and they've been driving China, to build all of these road networks and rail networks and stuff over there in Western China, because really most of their big cities and all are down along the coast and up and around the eastern side of China. Beijing and Shenzhen and Shanghai and all, they all go, and then Hong Kong and Guangdong and all these big port cities all along there. So they went into the western side, because the western side was really where, all their farming land, a lot of the west and up along the northern part of China is where all of their food is grown. So those areas were rural, not really as populated. I mean, there's a lot of people there, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's probably as many people, more people in that area than is in the United States, just in that rural belt, But all that area, they've been just breaking their neck, building this network of highways and railways and all that stuff. And it's my belief that it is it's preparing the way for them to go into the Middle East when they get drawn over there. And when they do, it says that, that it's like a Garden of Eden before them and, a wilderness, a desert behind them or whatever, because it says that fire and brimstone precedeth them, and hell, death and destruction followeth after. So they're going to be launching fire and brimstone, nuclear weapons, and that they're given power to kill 1/3 of mankind. Well, you just through a conventional means you couldn't do it. You just couldn't kill that many, because 1/3 of mankind, that's probably 2.5 billion people. And it talks about too, the 4th horseman of the apocalypse. I believe it's in chapter 6 of Revelation. It says that they're given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill with sword and with plagues and with pestilence and all this stuff. Some people interpret that to mean this horse, this 4th horse, this pale, sickly horse, and it comes from the Greek word chloros, which is green. That means it's going to, this horse kills 1/4 of man. But when you really listen to what it's saying there, to me, it sounds like it's saying that they're given power over 1/4 of the earth. In other words, they are ruling over 1/4 of the earth. And I believe this is the West. and that the West, that is ruling over this 1/4 of people, they have power to kill with plagues and when you look around at what's going on, there, and this religious system that's rising up, is going to be over 1/4 of the world. I think that's what it's kind of representing, this political religious system that will have dominion over 1/4 of the world's people. And they will kill with the sword and with plagues and with pestilences and stuff like that. And we're already seeing this stuff, these plagues, pestilence, and you see it, and I think in Amos it talks about that, the seas are roaring, and the pestilences, and plural, so more than one of them. And they're the ones releasing these things. We're seeing it, these committees up there, that these Republicans now have got control of the House of Representatives. They're talking about this stuff, the origin of it, and the gain of function research and all this stuff. And this thing, I believe they've got the technology and the knowledge now to where they can turn these things on and off, and they can actually increase them in their virility, their virulence, just by broadcasting a signal that triggers their epigenetics, turns them on and off, and that they can, that's what they've been doing with this gain of function research, is to see how they can make these things more and more virulent, and then they can ramp it up. They can turn it on again, turn it off, let things kind of settle down, and then turn it on again. And this time when they turn it on, they trigger it to more virulent, to where it's more potent. So you see, they and then you talk, the kings of the north, the alliance, the European alliance, and how they are trying to assert dominance over all of the West, and then we're acting as the enforcer of it, I think it's getting kind of serious, and I think that the military leader, the military political figure that's going to rise up and say that they have the solution to the problem, and that they can solve all this, and they're going to be backed by this religious figure that's going to support them, where you see the woman dressed in purple and scarlet riding the scarlet beast. That's a religious system that is going to give it the power, that's going to help to bring this political military entity to power, and to get everybody to go along with him. And I think he's getting ready to pop up here shortly. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to read some of that from the book of Enoch, to give, and tie it in with the scriptures, where you can see that they kind of go along with each other. And I believe that they had the book of Enoch long before the Bible was ever, the Torah was ever written by Moses. And that just like the book of Job, they had the book of Job. It's older than the rest of the the Torah and all that. And the same with Jashers and Jubilees. Those books have been around, and the scriptures mentions them by name. It mentions Jasher and Jubilees. I don't think it would mention them unless it's meant for people. It says, if you want to know more about this, go and read the book of Jasher. I think a lot of the Bible is sort of a synopsis. It gives us an abbreviated version of the events that happen. Sometimes it goes into greater detail. Like you can read in the books of Kings and the books of Chronicles, and they will give you a lot of details that are not necessarily in like Joshua or in Deuteronomy or somewhere or Exodus, and it'll give you more details about the kings and things that they did. And so I think these books can be helpful. And really, again, I kind of lean towards the belief that originally that the book of Enoch was in the scripture, and that those later generations, those Pharisees and stuff, and the Jews, they got rid of it because it talked about the Son of Man, and Christ was always calling himself the Son of Man. And throughout Enoch, a bunch of times in there, it calls him the Son of Man. And so they didn't like that. And the reason that the evangelicals don't like it and don't want to accept it is because what I read there in the very beginning of it, that this was written for those who were in great tribulation, the elect in tribulation. It's written for them. And the reason I believe too that it talks about these entities and all that stuff coming down here and all that stuff, because Christ in Matthew chapter 24 says, as it was in the days of Noah, or it might be Luke 21, but he says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the return of the Son of Man. And I talked about that last week. How, why would he say men's hearts fell in them for fear of looking after those things which are coming upon the earth? And then Enoch saying this is written for that generation, that distant generation that's alive in tribulation. The reason is because the same thing that was going on back then before the flood is going to be going on when the Messiah returns. Same kind of stuff they were doing back then. Genetic modifications and alterations, human 2.0, and these chips in people. Now, I don't know if they were doing that back then. I believe they had technologies that were different than the technologies that we have today. But we can't recognize it because it's so different from what we have. But they had technologies that were even more incredible than the technologies that we have now. Now, it may be that as time goes on, that these technologies like they had back then will be revealed. And we will be, starting to use that stuff like anti-gravity and stuff like that, which there ain't no gravity, not like what we've been told. It's just magnetic attraction. That's all it really is. Magnetic dipoles that are in our bodies. They just sail, molecules in our bodies that are chained together, that are attracted to the earth, that holds us down and all that stuff. But they anyway, I believe that our government and others already probably have some of these technologies they've been given to them, but they just keep that stuff hidden. Like the TR3, which there's a lot of people saw them. They have the ability to cloak. They can just sit there like this. They're triangle shaped. But I think it's our version of, they've kind of mastered the basic principles of these propulsion systems and stuff that allows them to just hover there without moving. It's sort of it's not really anti-gravity, it's just an anti-magnetic field. They're learning how to ride on magnetic fields that are generated by the earth. And so, people, like when the cathedral over there at Notre Dame burned up, there was people taking, that were taking pictures, film of the Notre Dame burning, and way back up in the sky up there was a black triangle up there, and they have like a big white looking half dome. It may be a ball shape or whatever, that half of it's inside the craft, but under the bottom it's just like a bowl shape, big white, some kind of device or something that helps them to be able to just hover there. But they saw it, and it was and they wasn't really looking at that. They were filming the fire of Notre Dame, and then when they went in to start editing the film afterwards, there it was, and so they can use these things, or the powers that be, and it may not be like the military that's using them. It may be something like the CIA or somebody like that has these things, and that they can go around and because they go around, that's what they do. They try to overthrow governments, coups and create instability in countries and uprisings. And so it wouldn't surprise me that they don't go around in something like that right there and target structures like that there, and set them on fire, or I'm just speculating. I'm not saying it's an absolute fact, but when you look at their history and the things that they've been attributed to them, nothing would be, I would put nothing past them or our government. But anyway, folks, I just want to kind of encourage you, that of course, absolutely, our scriptures is our foundation for our belief and for truth. But I've had a few people ask me, what do you study and who do you listen to? Well, of course, I read the book of Enoch. I have the book of Jubilees. I have the Apocrypha. I have the book of Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews. And I listen to people like David Carrico and John Pounders. They have a program on YouTube called The Midnight Ride. It's Now You See TV. Pastor Dean Odell, he has a church down in Opelika, Georgia, or Alabama. And he's a flat earther. So is David Carrico and John Pounders. Also, I watch some of the Tomorrow's World, which is the Living Church of God. I listen to some of their stuff. I agree with a lot of what they say. There's some stuff I kind of differ on with them, but it's not salvation related. I mean, it's just certain things like the flat earth and stuff like that, and some other, things. They mainly talk about the millennium and the kingdom and the return of the Messiah. They teach a lot about who the ancient house of Israel became, and the ancient Assyrians, who they are now. And I've talked about this, when I've done my video on who is the house of Israel, there's something else I was wanting to say. I can't think of it. Kind of lost my thought there, but anyway, but also, if you can get old, like encyclopedias, like the old Britannicas and the World, Encyclopedia, and the old Merriam-Webster dictionary from like the 1800s. You can get, see, like a lot of them dictionaries and encyclopedias, a lot of the stuff that's in there from them older ones, it's been taken out. They took a lot of that stuff out because they're trying to hide history, and they try, like Tartaria. Nobody ever hears about Tartaria, but there's ancient maps that show Tartaria, which was an area that was over there were Russia, China, and India, all the way over here to the Americas. Was an empire that ruled all of that, all around there, and all around the northern part of over into Turkey and even above where Turkey is up there, all that land along there, the Caucasus and the Black Sea area and all across there, over into Europe. And there's all these star forts. They're all over the world. But nobody really knows who built them. A lot of people occupied them. I mean, different powers, when they, rose up in power and all that, they'd move into an area and they would use those star forts, but them star forts were already there. And so it's believed that they were constructed by Tartaria, and that is where Lucifer ruled from. Halal ben Sahar ruled over Tartaria, and probably even back before the flood, but afterwards, after the flood, these entities still, and you have Gog. Gog is not, when you hear about Gog and Magog. Magog was descended from Japheth. He was one of Japheth's sons. Gog is an entity, either a fallen angel or one of these Nephilim spirits, but that is the force that rules over that area. Because, when you read, for example, Daniel, I believe it's in chapter 11, he's been praying for 21 days and fasting, for an answer about something. And Gabriel comes to him, the angel comes to him, and he, it's Gabriel, and tells him, what he was waiting on. And he says that the prince of Persia had been, contending with him, and only Michael was able to help him to overcome him. And then he had to get back and continue to contend with him until he had to contend with the prince of Grecia. And so he's talking about fallen ones that were given authority over different regions, different countries, and Gog is one of them. He's one of these that region is his region that he rules over as a principality. And then, of course, ultimately, Hasatan is at the head up here, the king or whatever ruling. And he rules over principalities. It tells us this, he's the prince of the power of the air, and that he rules over these principalities. And he, all around the world. There's one here in America, it's the principality over here, that we've been given over to. But anyway, wanted to kind of give you some of this stuff, so that you can go and do you a little bit of homework in this stuff. And like I say, you can get even from secular stuff like Merriam-Webster. He was a Christian. And that's why his early dictionaries and all would have all this stuff in it. But then these modern versions of it, they took a lot of that stuff out. They don't want you to know about these people and these, these characters and these entities and all this stuff. And so you can get a lot of knowledge if you can get the older ones. And you can go on, like I say, I've got the 1611 King James with the Apocrypha in it. Because the original King James, originally in 1611, had the Apocrypha in it. And it's pretty interesting. I've read, first and second Esdras, Tobit, Judith. I mean, there's a lot of these Ecclesiasticus, um, the book of Solomon, and now I'm not saying, take them as, absolute, but they, some of them actually give you some really good stuff. I mean, that I believe is inspired. Some of it is just historical writing, basically, and of course, the thing that it helps you to do is you can get context from it. You can look at the historical context, and you can see parallels. That it confirms what the Bible says. As far as timelines and into people, people that existed and stuff like that. So with that, I hope this is this information will help you. It'll encourage you to study some of this stuff, get a little better understanding about what is coming. I mean, because you can kind of gather from like I say from Enoch there. He's telling us that how this is all coming to a head. In this time of tribulation, and then he's talking about this millennial time of righteousness and peace. And when people will be given the truth, given this opportunity, and then when we come to the last great day, and the books are open, and the book of life is open, Satan's loosed again, and the final opportunity for people to, those who have died, that are raised again, and those who come through the Great Tribulation and went through the millennium, now's their opportunity to choose the side. Now that they know the truth and they've been taught in righteousness, now they have to make that choice as to whether they're going to follow Satan into destruction, or whether they're going to go into the kingdom. Because at the end of that, once it's all, the end of the great day, last great day, it says that that Satan and Gog and Magog, they go out gathering people around the world, and they bring them against the holy city, which is Jerusalem, and fire comes down out of heaven and consumes them. And that's the end of it. And then it says that in Revelation 21 that the earth is burnt up, the firmament, and a new earth and a new heavens are made. And it says that the city, Jerusalem, the new Jerusalem, comes down out of heaven in this place, and it's huge. 1,500 square miles city that comes down, and the Elohim and Yahweh are the light thereof. I mean, his kingdom is among us then. That's when his kingdom is truly established here on the earth. And it's eternal kingdom. So with that, folks, I love you. Thank you for joining me again. And I'll see you again on the next Shabbat, if Yahweh is willing.